What's up everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of my State of Xbox Game Studios series. As the number 13 is considered unlucky, I figured this would be the best time to delve into Tango Gameworks, who are Xbox's newly acquired horror-centric developer. Tango is a relatively young developer, but they have a rich history that begins far before their founding. Let's dive in and examine their accomplishments in the horror genre, as well as if they can help build up the state of Xbox now that they've been acquired.
Still your fear. I will be her salvation.
Mari!
The time is nigh. The world rests on the precipice of transformation. A new age will dawn!
Tango Gameworks is a Tokyo-based developer that was founded by Shinji Mikami, who is the person you picture when you think horror games. Mikami began his career at Capcom and is primarily known for his work on the Resident Evil franchise, which he created. He served as director for the first game in 1996, before returning in the same role for the remake in 2002 and the critically acclaimed Resident Evil 4 in 2005. However, over time, Mikami felt that Capcom had grown too large, resulting in too few opportunities for young developers to showcase their talent and have real input during development of AAA titles. And so he and a team of 12 others left to create Tango Gameworks in March 2010. Their first project was Noah, an open-world survival game inspired by the 1984 Dune film, yet shortly after development began, Tango ran into financial issues. Bethesda then stepped in and had its parent company, ZeniMax Media, acquire Tango, which was announced in October 2010. Mikami agreed to the acquisition because he felt Bethesda would provide the most independent development environment. Following acquisition, the Dune-inspired game was cancelled and development on a new AAA project, titled Zwei, was publicly announced in 2012. Initially, this game saw a chained-together man and woman hunting down a vampire, with either two players controlling each character individually, or one player controlling both simultaneously. However, over time, the game evolved into the single-player survival horror game we know, The Evil Within, which was announced in April 2013 and released in October 2014. The Evil Within was a welcome return to true survival horror, as Mikami was disappointed by the emphasis on action at the expense of survival in contemporary horror games like Resident Evil 5 and 6. It was deliberately designed to make the player feel powerless by taking place in confined spaces, limiting ammunition, and presenting near-invincible enemies that promote running and hiding over engaging in combat. I personally loved The Evil Within, which was one of the few bright spots in the very disappointing year for games that was 2014. It was absolutely levels above what Resident Evil, my favourite video games franchise, had become with Resident Evil 5 and 6. I certainly think more highly of it than the 75 it has on Metacritic, yet despite the good but not great score, the game sold well. In Japan, where the game was titled the far cooler name of Psycho Break and had to actually remove gore-related content to receive the Japanese equivalent of an M rating, sold just under 200,000 copies across all platforms at launch. In the United States, it broke the sales record for a new survival horror IP during its launch month. It was therefore inevitable that we'd see a sequel.
I created this world. You cannot keep me here.
Development for The Evil Within 2 began in March 2015, shortly after DLC for the first game wrapped. Yet it was quite some time later until it was officially announced at E3 in June 2017, before releasing only a few months later in October. For the sequel, Shinji Mikami lived up to the ideals Tango was initially founded on. He stepped down as director and entered a supervisor role to provide opportunities for younger developers at the studio to showcase their talent. This new blood listened to the loudest criticisms given to the first game and made the necessary changes. For example, there was a big focus to make the Evil Within 2 story easier for players to understand, as the first game was slammed for getting too complicated towards the end. The 2:5:1 aspect ratio was also removed due to the mixed response it received at release, even though the team liked it. Finally, the biggest change in The Evil Within 2 were the largest maps that resulted in the addition of side missions and numerous ways for players to advance in a level. These changes easily could have backfired, but were ultimately successful as it led to a high Metacritic of 80 and a development schedule that was quite a bit shorter and therefore cheaper than the original. Despite the changes, not only did I enjoy The Evil Within 2, but I prefer it. Their finely tuned, balanced version of a semi-open world really immersed me, and though it was less scary, this change led to more interesting moment-to-moment gameplay. It also didn't hurt that Resident Evil was now back on form with 7, and so I could get my true horror fix back in the franchise that started it all.
Welcome to the family, son.
Yet despite all these positives, unfortunately, The Evil Within 2 compares badly where it matters most, in sales. Estimates put the game as selling roughly 25% of the copies the original did during the same launch period. It's therefore no wonder why Tango moved on from the franchise for their next game, called Ghostwire Tokyo. This was announced during Bethesda's E3 2019 conference, where it was described as an action-adventure game with horror elements. Once again, Mikami refrained from taking the director's position to give that opportunity to the young talent at Tango. Originally, this was Ikumi Nakamura who became the talk of the game for a hot minute before resigning from Tango only a couple months later in September 2019. The game appeared again in a Sony 2020 showcase, where it was announced that it would be a timed PS5 exclusive for at least a year. Additionally, the new director, Kenji Kimura, showed off gameplay that was very different to the Evil Within franchise. For one, this game was in first person, and secondly, the game further toned down the horror aspects compared to Nakamura's 2019 vision, to the point where it was more in line with an action-adventure game than a Resident Evil 7. The game was eventually released in March 2022 and scored a 77 on Metacritic. As I'm sure you can predict, I enjoyed the game far more than that score. In fact, it's currently my third favourite game of 2022 behind Horizon and Elden Ring. Once again, Tango created an excellent open world that required you to collect a certain amount of spirits to free Tokyo from the antagonist in the Hanya mask. This was done by essentially turning the game into Crackdown, where you're going to spend hours collecting all of them. And you're going to enjoy it because the traversal mechanics are so good. The combat is great fun too, which is no surprise considering Shinichiro Hara, who worked on the combat of 2016's Doom, joined Tango to help the team craft what he describes as karate meets magic. The game also has the best story Tango's created and had me tearing up at the end. I really recommend this game. Just go online and find the correct controls, because the default ones are terrible and are the reason why the game reviewed worse than it should have. Finally, despite Ghostwire only releasing a few months ago, Tango have already released another game called Hero Dice, which is a turn-based game for mobile that I'm done talking about as it's already shut down less than 5 months after launch. So, where does Tango Gameworks stand amongst its peers in Xbox's portfolio? Well, it's clear that I have a very high opinion of their works, and it's also clear that my opinion is far more positive than the general industry consensus, considering the good, but not industry-defining Metacritic scores their games have received. And as for them helping to improve the Xbox ecosystem in comparison to PlayStation, they're just not in a position to do so anytime soon. At the very earliest, Ghostwire will come to Xbox in March 2023, and even that isn't certain when looking at Deathloop, which also had PS5 exclusivity signed before the Microsoft acquisition of Bethesda. That game was also considered to only have a year of exclusivity, yet that's up in about a week, and there is no sign of it coming to Xbox once that anniversary hits. And in fact, the only recent news is that it's coming to PlayStation Plus. I imagine that Tango's next game, which could potentially be Xbox exclusive, wouldn't arrive until 2025 at the earliest, which by then, we will already know just how successful the PS5 and Series consoles will be, as we'll be 5+ years into the generation, and their popularity will be set in stone. For the few of us out there who are big fans of Tango's games, there's no reason to think they won't flourish under Microsoft and their money long term. They're just not going to be a developer they can turn to really differentiate the Xbox ecosystem from PlayStation, at least until the next console cycle.